Now I know what you guys are probably wondering. Titan, where's the solo leveling with it? And to that, all I have to say is I'm gonna get to it. I just recently got back into school. Basically, my winter break is over now, so yeah, I'm just getting back into the school groove. And while Neptune was basically able to help me with a Trigon what if real quick, like we basically already got like the full outline for the story. It's just that I'm going to be doing it in parts. And as far as the solo leveling what if, yeah, I'm also going to be doing that in parts as well, considering like all of the details that I will need to be adding in there. It's just that with Trigon, it's just easier to put out right now. So yeah, that's about it. Now to roll that intro.
何としてでも勝つ。何としてでも生きる。
Now the story would actually start off with Canteria Leviathan. She would have been she would have been embarrassed. She had basically been humiliated. Her family name it was taken away from her, and it was turned into some sort of title. She and other descendants of the ancient devils were trying to fight for their birthrights, but unfortunately, not even one of them were able to win against these new Satans. Kateria would have been frustrated, but she wouldn't quit. I'm sure she had basically been exiled after her humiliating attempt at trying to fight for the throne, but she would figure out a way to get her revenge. She wasn't a quitter. After all, she had heard about there being another ancient being, which was supposed to have a similar strength to the first devil, Lucifer. Well, for all she knew actually, this devil could be even stronger than him. The only issue though was, well, they seemingly weren't a part of this realm. This being was just not part of their realm for some reason. She couldn't explain how that was possible. They were some sort of demon or like some sort of devil, but at the same time, it seemed that they were completely built different from the rest, as if they were completely detached from the rest of the Satans. As if Lucifer had no hand in creating him at all. It was possible that this devil could have actually been there before, who knows. For all she knew, this devil could have probably been the actual creator of devils. For all she knew, this could have been the actual first devil. Or he and Lucifer were just there at the same time. The two of them were always there, it's just that Lucifer decided to hang around Earth while this other being decided to travel the dimensions more. Kateria would decide that she wanted to find out more about this being, so over the years she would try to learn more about him, and she would also learn to try and summon him. There would be multiple unsuccessful attempts though, but she would not quit. Eventually, she would actually end up successfully summoning this being. Once she managed to summon him, he manifested himself as a charming, silver-haired male with facial hair. Canteria would end up being intrigued with this being. She would end up actually bearing one of his kids in the long run too. But after the birth of this kid, that she ended up deciding to name Issei, Trigon, well, he would reveal his true form and power. right then and there. But rather than being horrified, Kateria would show the exact opposite reaction. She was seemingly excited. She was just floating up in glee, which would confuse Trigon for a second. But she would explain that in her eyes, she had just produced her offspring to double up an incredible amount of power. She herself was a devil, and on top of that, she believed that her child had the greatest amount of potential among her species, at least in this era. For all she knew, there could probably be stronger beings in the future, but as far as she was concerned right now, Issei had the greatest potential in order to reclaim the throne, be able to reclaim their family name, basically take back their birthright, what was rightfully theirs and no one else's. She had waited so long to exact revenge, so when it came on to raising Issei, she really had no issues with that. She found that she could probably wait a couple more years. After all, she had waited for so long in order to exact revenge, so trying to just wait a little bit longer in order to make sure that the strongest being would actually be to par with, well, the rest. Basically she had no issues waiting, because she knew at the end of the day she would basically be waiting to create the strongest being to ever step foot on the planet Earth. That was basically what was going through Kateria's mind at the time. She would also be disappointed though when she found out that Trigon showed no interest in helping her take over the underworld. It would have been disappointing, but she could understand that he had other things to worry about. Well, he was probably like the most powerful being to really step foot onto this planet, so why would he concern himself with such trivial things in comparison? He should be trying to take over the world or something. Why bother for just one measly realm when he can take over all of them? She would just let Trigon go on to do his own things. It wasn't like she could stop him, but she would try to raise Issei. It wouldn't be the best sort of parenting though. Over the years, Kateria wouldn't be like the most caring sort of parent at all. She would actually force Issei to learn how to wield magic from an early age, when he simply just wanted to play with her. She wanted him to be as strong as possible after all, stronger than even his own father. She would tell Issei stories about his father over the years too, and she would make sure Issei would truly figure out his place within this world. It was to be able to take over the underworld, and if he could not do that, he would be considered a failure. Simple as that. So Issei would end up learning how to wield fire magic. It actually seemed like he had an affinity to fire magic. It actually seemed that he had some sort of affinity to fire magic, considering how breathing fire was one of the very first abilities he learned. Issei also ended up finding himself capable of wielding both dark and water magic. Kateria would be overjoyed when she saw Issei eventually go on to achieve their family's bloodline ability, that being the Sea Serpent of the End. This ability would have been first revealed when Issei actually turned into a large serpent-like dragon while the two of them were sparring. Kateria was beating him senselessly, and in response Issei was getting tired of the beatdowns. He was annoyed. He seemingly snapped at that moment, and he would have lashed out against his mother in this new form form of his. With this form came other abilities as well, one being a blue and black aura that he was able to shoot out of his own mouth. Kateria would move out of the way only to witness the amount of damage Issei was able to cause in that form. Kateria would smile. She would have found Issei to be ready at this point. She would leave Issei at a random pike and figure he could fend for himself from here on out. He was 12 years old at this point. It didn't take long for Issei to grasp the situation and go on to figure out a way to survive moving forward though. Issei would brainwash an older couple and have them believe he was a child. He would even take on a mixture of some of their features as well in order to make it more believable to outsiders that he was their kid. Issei would continue training from there on out with his magic over the years, and he would actually get a hang of this dragon form of his. He would be enrolled into school, and in all honesty, he found it to be really boring. He would abandon the couple and wipe away his existence too. He would go back to his original form, and he would go on to simply explore Japan. He would learn to survive on his own until he one day decided to go back to school. He had nothing better to do after all. For the longest at this point, Issei was simply journeying all throughout Japan, stealing food, going to some shelters, and basically disguising himself as an average Joe from time to time, grabbing an apple or two, and just trying to keep his head up for most of the time, and slowly building up his strength as well. But now that he decided that he wanted to go back to school, give it another shot, he would actually brainwash another couple in order to enroll him into another school. When comparing his age and the standard age for a person per grade level, Issei would end up finding himself being enrolled into Kuoh Academy. Issei, while at this academy, he would end up discovering something off about the school. That being with the fact he could sense people who were like his mother here, and where they were seemingly devils. He would go on to investigate and find out about a girl by the name of Rias Gremory. Her last name. It sounded familiar to him for some reason. He would actually remember how his mother used to always talk about how he would surpass all of the devils in the underworld, including people like Sir Zex, the Gremory clan. He, from his understanding, basically was the one to take over the Lucifer title. And the most recent additions to the Gremory family were actually Sir Zex and Rias Gremory. They were the ones to actually wield the power of destruction, thanks to their mother being part of the Baal clan. Well, originally anyways. Issei would actually get approached by Rias one day though, and it turned out that she had also had an interest in Issei. She would remark about the fact he seemed to be different from the others at this school. She would whisper into his ear, mentioning the fact that he was a devil, and well, he would try to deny it at first, trying to keep a low profile, but Rias would see through his act immediately. Issei would eventually just give up and admit it. Rias would smirk. She would actually request for Issei to join their peerage in exchange for keeping his secret. She could tell that he was strong after all, but Issei would refuse, and he would actually poke her forehead in response. A strange symbol would appear before disappearing almost as soon as it appeared. Rias was now under Issei's control. Issei, he didn't care for his mother's grudge against the underworld, but he did care about creating a strong lineage. The girl seemed like an average teenager as far as Issei had observed beyond her, well, of course, being a devil. She would have been 17 at the time she fell under Issei's control, while Issei was 16, and throughout the next year Issei would begin to take control of the school. He found their teaching system to be pointless and that it would be better to simply learn something that they'd actually use in the great big world. You know, things like knowing how to defend yourselves would be really useful for real life. Who knew what would happen? Who knows what can happen to you? For all you know, you can end up getting mugged one day, or some people challenge you to a fight. You need to know how to fight in order to protect yourself in this world, after all. And that was basically Issei's logic. And so, he would decide to be the one to enforce a new order onto the school. He would brainwash the principal in order to create new rules for the school, and the teaching system would actually be completely thrown out the window for the academy. Many teachers, they would have actually had complaints with how everything was suddenly being handled, but Issei would have a little talk with them. That talk involving him basically wiping their memory of any involvement with the school. It would have only taken a month to clear up those issues, and Issei would move on to make his presence known throughout the rest of the school. Issei would start out with simply fighting the kids at his school in order to show dominance. He would then create a hierarchy within the school, with him being at the top. There would be groups who would attempt to stop Issei, such as Sona's peerage, but they would all be defeated in the end. Issei would subjugate each and every last one of them. He would also be able to tell that these were people who were just on a different level from the rest. You could tell that there were always going to be some people within the school built completely different, and he was able to tell it with Sona's peerage as the very first ones. He could sense the devils within the school, and he knew that they weren't the only ones. Rias had been subjugated by Issei for the longest now, so she was easy to control at this point. So he would make sure to request for her to gather all of the devils within their school. It had been 3 months since she had been put into Issei's control, so any form of rebellion from her was gone at this point. So Rias would simply do as Issei said with no questions asked. She would return with her own peerage and Sona Citri's own. Issei would actually turn them into his generals in a sense. The uniforms for the school would have been changed to appeal more to Issei's tastes, with him being the only one not to wear a uniform. It was basically meant to show that he was above all of them as well, the fact that he was the only one not wearing a uniform. But he would actually be wearing a hoodie and ripped jeans most of the time instead. Over the next 9 months, Issei would force the student council to enforce his laws for the school. It would affect every grade level, and those that stepped out of line would regret it almost immediately as they would get beaten down by said council members. Sona did not want to do this, but Issei was simply too strong for her to do anything against. Sona would have felt humiliated with all of what was going on. Sona would feel bad for Rias as well. She remembered the girl used to always be hot-tempered, but ever since Issei joined the school, she changed. Rias was quiet most of the time now. She obeyed everything Issei ordered her to do, like some sort of lapdog. Sona would have found out why a month into her own subjugation by Issei. She couldn't believe that Rias would have actually been brainwashed into listening to such a guy like Issei. She would have figured that it would all be over soon though, when Rias turned 18. Sona remembered the fact that Rias was basically what ended up happening is that Rias had been distraught for a while now, due to the fact that she was basically going to be getting married when she turned 18. When she turned 18, she was basically going to get married to this guy by the name of Riser Phoenix. She was already engaged to the man because of something about wanting to make more pure devils or something, stronger devils or whatever you wanted to call them. Rias didn't care though. She hated the guy. She absolutely despised him. And Sona remembered that as well. She figured it would all be over though once Rias turned 18, since of course they would need to be able to get her married to the guy known as Riser Phoenix. And she figured that they would also need to be in the right mind. Once doing that, they would also need to get the attention of Sir Zex Lucifer. Once they got the attention of Sir Zex Lucifer and Riser Phoenix, they'll be able to get rid of the brainwashing and also get rid of Issei's rule over the school. And once they were able to do that, then it would just be smooth sailing from there, just slowly bringing the school back to normality. A year passed though, and Rias would become 18 years old. A magical circle would appear one day in what used to be the Occult Research Club. Graphia would appear out to the portal, and she would observe the situation. There would have been some reports of some strange activity happening within this school after all. Graphia would look around and find that the school had been completely flipped on its head. Graphia would end up finding Rias and questioning just what was going on. Sona would have been close by though, and she would run over to Graphia, greeting her, before explaining the situation. Sona saw this as her home to get out of the situation now. She didn't want to report the situation to the higher-ups until now, since she thought, that maybe, just maybe, she could find a way out of this situation, at least beforehand. And, well, throughout the months, she ended up finding that she was wrong. There was simply no way out of it unless she were to report this to the higher-ups. Her best luck now was with getting the information passed on to Rias's older brother. Graphia would be sure to inform Sir Zex of the situation, but Sir Zex wouldn't be the one to actually step in. Serafal would have been the one to request to speak with a boy known as Issei. She would have teleported to Kuoh Academy and find a boy in an empty cafeteria doing push-ups. Serafal would interrupt him and introduce herself. Hearing her last name would cause Issei's eyes to widen. At first he would think that she was related to his mother in a way and point this out. Serafal would be surprised hearing who Issei's mother was, but she would deny having any relation with the woman besides having the same last name as her. In Serafal's case though, the last name was more of a title than anything. Kateria was a bloodborne Leviathan. Bloodborne Leviathan. Serafal would prepare to have to fight Issei, but the boy would simply shrug hearing this. Serafal would be surprised at the little reaction the boy had once she explained who she was. She figured that he would want to fight her as much as possible, try and seek some honor for his mother or something along those lines. It seemed like something Kateria would try and enforce into the kid's mind from early on, so she was confused as to why he didn't want to fight her. Issei would explain that he could care less though about his mother's grudges. In his eyes, she was a terrible mother to him. She always trying to force her burdens onto him from when he had only just begun to utter his first words. Serafal would question him about what he did to the school, and Issei would explain that he made it better, and where the kids would learn practical things for when they went into the real world. Learn that life wasn't easy, and that you had to be creative with the scraps you were given in order to survive, and in some cases, thrive, in order to make it to the absolute top, make it to the pinnacle of the human world at the very least, by enduring the hardships within this school. If the school was harder than what real life was going to be like, then life was going to be a breeze for them afterwards. Once they graduated from this school and gone on to deal with the real world, it would basically be a breeze for them. There would be absolutely no worries when it came on to trying to land a job or anything along those lines, because of the fact that they had already endured so much from Issei's rule that this was easy in comparison. It was basically like living on hard mode for all of your life and then switching to normal mode right after. That's basically how it would have been for the kids. That's what Issei's goal was. Hearing this, Seraphal wouldn't really know how to respond. She would instead decide to move on to further business. She would actually offer Issei the opportunity to form his own peerage and have personal training from her, so long as he agreed to join her faction. That faction being, well, the Devil's faction, or like the New Satans, or something along those lines. And something else that she wouldn't have necessarily mentioned to Issei though was the whole thing with the Chaos Brigade. The Chaos Brigade was a group that was actually causing quite a bit of trouble for the three factions. Knowing Issei was the son of one of the members of the Old Satan faction was concerning for Seraphal, so she would try and make sure that he would join their faction before it was too late, before the Old Satan faction was able to fully corrupt Issei. Issei would hear the offer, and he would think about it. He could tell that this woman was strong, so he would actually agree to the bargain. Seraphal would of course been relieved. She didn't want to risk another person joining the Chaos Brigade and acting Trigon's will, especially Issei, considering the fact she could tell he had a high amount of potential just by looking at him. She wondered who Issei's father was for him to have such a high amount of potential. It rivaled even Milikis' own. And he was the son of the strongest queen and Sir Zex Lucifer. With the agreement being made, she would report back to Sir Zex the new situation. Issei would have been made a king and given evil pieces, only for Issei to request Rias's pieces. Her peerage would be converted into Issei's own with the exception of Rias. Sir Zex would request for Issei to actually relinquish his control over the redhead's sister, as she was supposed to be getting married soon. Issei wouldn't take too kindly to these words, and he would explain that Rias was his, and that the only person she'd ever marry would probably be him. Sir Zex would get frustrated, and he would explain that the engagement was made to unite the Phoenix and Gremory family. But Issei, he wouldn't care. He would be willing to actually fight whoever Rias's old lover boy was, if it meant he could continue to have his control over her. Sir Zex would sigh and actually schedule a rating game between Issei and Riser a month from now. Issei, hearing the time he actually had to train his peerage, would actually make sure that absolutely no time was put to waste whatsoever. During Issei's rule, Kuoh would have been forced to be in a Nekomata form at all times during training. she would even begin to act more like a cat from time to time, thanks to Issei's influence. Kiba, well, he would have been Issei's messenger boy, and of course one of his enforcers as well. One of his most heavy enforcers, you could actually say. His swordsmanship would have improved by leaps and bounds while fighting Issei, due to him having to constantly adapt to the boy's abilities. Akeno was of course another one of his enforcers, probably the most brutal of his enforcers too. And she would have actually also been Issei's maid for the most part. She would have actually ended up forming a more sadistic personality during this time though. She would only hold back when it came on to close friends and where she only slugged them in the shoulder. Others, they weren't so lucky. She would actually go on to step on some of the students with a smile on her face. She would have some of them bow down, and she would use them as some sort of stepping stone at times. Just use them as a sort of sidewalk or something, just showing her superiority to them. She would hear their cries of pain, and that would continue to put a smile on their face. But unfortunately, this wouldn't have just been something randomly that ended up developing. No, this would have actually been Akeno's coping mechanism after finding out that the devils wouldn't do anything to help their situation. In fact, they only made it worse by making Issei their new king. They were also training for a rating game in order to decide whether Rias would continue to be mind-controlled by Issei or be married off to the jerk that was Riser. Finding her best friend was nothing but a husk at this point would deeply upset Akeno too. She would have no choice but to give in to her more sadistic tendencies. She would have ended up going back into her more sadistic tendencies in order to avoid going through a mental breakdown. Or well, she kinda did. This was basically her mental breakdown at this point, and she would have found comfort in seeing the pain on others' faces. When it came on to Gaspar, he would have been taught by Issei personally in order to gain better control of his sacred gear, and eventually find himself giving into his more dark tendencies as well. After all, he was part vampire, so he was given into that nature now. He would of course start to drink some people's blood, but he would know when to restrain himself. At the very least, he would only do it to a couple of kids at a time at school, but when it came on to his teammates, he wouldn't actually do that. He wouldn't actually drink their blood. No, he would be too scared of Issei to do such a thing. Issei's training was harsh as well when it came on to Gaspar. Gaspar was able to basically freeze people in place. He had some sort of time-related sacred gear, and it also dealt with his eyes as well. So Issei would have basically been working on trying to improve that, trying to improve how long he can hold something in place regardless of its size. And of course, Issei would make sure to train his physical body to the utmost limit as well. By the end of the month, Issei would have boosted his team's morale by actually explaining that if they did well in this rating game, he would be willing to loosen up the restraints he had on Rias to where they could communicate with the girl again. She would still be completely subservient to Issei though. Hearing this, they could agree to those odds. The group would go out into the field and they would attack Rise's peerage, doing a number on each and every last one of them. Issei would find Riser and pummel him into the ground. He would find out that the blonde had regeneration though. This was apparently what the Phoenix clan prided themselves on, but Issei would find a loophole around it. He would mess with Rice's mind, compromising the effectiveness of the blonde's regeneration. He would find out right then and there that although Rice's body may have basically been immortal, his mind surely wasn't. It wouldn't take long for Issei's team to win the competition. Issei would also be a man of his word though, and where he would actually release the restraints he had on Rias. Well, sort of. He would loosen up the restraints, giving her a personality once again. It would only really show when talking to the group members though. The group could handle that for now. But the next situation would be when two girls from a church, one with basically two giant pigtails, I shouldn't say giant, but very long pigtails, and sort of orange-like hair, and another girl with blue hair, with one green strand. They would have actually ended up going to the school and end up finding the occult research club. They would have wondered just what was going on there, and Rias would actually be the one to approach the girls, wondering what they wanted. This would of course been under Issei's orders as well. He was watching everything that was going on from her eyes, and the girls would explain the whole situation with Excalibur. Kuoh would have also been listening in, and he would be interested. He wanted to join in on this operation. Issei would end up hearing how Kuoh was interested in joining these girls on their operation in order to basically take down whoever stole Excalibur. And Issei would be skeptical at first. He would eventually just allow the boy to go and help the girls though, after he fought them and basically showed that he was above both of them in terms of strength and speed. But of course, Issei wasn't exactly the most trusting of people. He would make sure that the swordsman boy, was being watched at all times. And if this boy ever decided to slip up, he would make sure that he would regret it immediately. And yeah, that's basically all I have for right now, people. It is your boy, King Tynex, signing out. You guys already know the details. If you like the video, like it. Just hit the like button. And if you like my content in general, you may as well hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell. If you like this video and you know others who may like the video, mind sharing it real quick. And yeah, also leave a comment below, because I'm curious as to, because I have one question for you guys. So should I or should I not give Issei boosted gear for the solo leveling? What if though? Because that can actually change up quite a bit. Like, for whether I give him boosted gear or not, it depends on you guys. So I will probably also end up making a community tab post about it, or like a poll, basically trying to figure out what you guys want for it. And yeah, that's all I got for right now, people. And so just leave a comment below and also vote and in the poll whenever I make it. And yeah, it is your boy King Tynex signing out. Peace.